Good evening. Well, tonight's our third night at the museum presentation, and I'm glad to see all of you here. Our program tonight is Orange What, Orange Who? And that's a pretty good question for Orange City, I think. But one of the things that first, what I'd like you to remember is to please silence your cell phones. That way we can concentrate on the speaker. Now, originally, the program was to have been presented by John Bunsma. And since he's the one that did the research and all the material on our presentation tonight, I thought I should give you some background on him. Now, John went to college intending to be a history major, and that lasted a day or two until he went to the history department meeting. He said stamp collecting had spurred his interest in history, so he thought the next best thing would be journalism. So John became a mass communication major. He spent his career editing newspapers and finished with corporate technical writing. Now, his interest in William came because most of the people have kind of a vague knowledge of who William of Orange was. And John wanted people to know more about him, and so he spent about 3 months immersing himself in William of Orange and his life. So the more he read, the more fascinated he became, and his hope tonight is that you will leave with the same appreciation for this remarkable namesake of Orange City. Now, since John was unable to make it tonight, he asked Jan to do the presentation. Now, Jan was a ditch digger and actually working on a crew that made canals. He first bumped into William of Orange at a street market in the village of Sassenheim. Working outside in the fresh air for the last 500 years has preserved Jan quite well. Jan will tell us more about William the Silent and why he was so important to our heritage. Jan.
Hallo, het is erg jammer dat Sean kon niet hier komen, maar ja, ik ben Jan en ik ga mijn best doen. What I just said is I'm really sorry. Oh. Did I? Yeah. Check this a minute. There we go. At any rate, it's my pleasure to be in Orange City, a town named after William, Prince of Orange, Nassau. A lot of us just called him Orange. He was one of those rare nobles who would listen to us common people. We could walk right up to him. Honestly, I have not seen a better man in the last 500 years. So, let's tell his story from the start. William was born April 24, 1533, to Count William I of Nassau-Dillenburg and Juliana Stolberg-Werengerode. Dad was born in Dillenburg Castle that was then in the Holy Roman Empire and now is part of Germany. William I and Juliana both had earlier marriages. He really wanted a son to take over his lowly estate. Shortly after the marriage, the family followed Juliana's lead and became Lutheran. Dad's main focus in life was tending his limited land holdings that included cherished plum and cherry trees. William's later courage and holiness are attributed to lessons learned from his mother, who it is said tempered his character and armed his mind against all weakness. William would later suffer many military and political reverses, but would maintain Gemeentendrei. The family also grew and eventually amounted to 17 children. Another lesson William began to absorb was getting along with others. So William's first cousin, René of Chalon, had found favor with Charles V, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. René received land and titles over Orange, which is located in France. Holland and 3 other provinces among his rewards. At age 25, René, the Prince of Orange, died in battle without leaving any heirs. Any direct heirs, I should say. So Emperor Charles was a devout Catholic who didn't want William's father, a Lutheran, you'll recall, to inherit. So he awarded René substantial holdings to 11-year-old William, as long as William had a Catholic education. Duke Charles V was born, raised, and spent much time in the Netherlands. He became one of the most powerful men in Europe through his new role as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He was a bridge between the Burgundy and Habsburg empires. The empire included Germany, Austria, Italy, Spain, and the Low Countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and a small part of France. So, did that slide come up before? There we go. William went from rustic early years at home to a very genteel, privileged environment that spoiled him in many ways. He went from a frugal existence to an extravagant one. Still, Orange was courteous to all. He was fluent in German, Spanish, Flemish, and Latin. Orange used French for nearly all of his communication during his entire life. Despite growing up speaking German, he received military and diplomatic training from Champagne, the brother of Granville, an extremely powerful Catholic cardinal, and we'll meet him again a little bit later. At age 18, William entered the first of his 4 marriages, and we'll get into that in a bit as well. As a young man, he was extremely rich and the life of the party. By the time he died, he had become the lifeline of a nation. Charles really liked William and gave him nobility titles that included property. Let's take a quick look at some of those titles. Archduke, he was not an archduke. A duke, that comes just below that. Then a prince, he was the Prince of Orange, and I'll just go through these really quickly. A marquis, a count, a viscount, a baron, and a lord. Charles, there we go. Charles also gave William a shot at military command, putting him in charge of 20,000 men with the goal of defeating the French near the Spanish border town of Bayonne. Yeah, it became apparent that William was better suited to diplomacy than fighting. And Charles gave him more and more diplomatic responsibilities, trusting him over his son Philip in those roles. It wasn't long after this that, due to health and some other issues, Charles abdicated his role as emperor and retired to Spain. Charles gave command of the eastern part of his empire to his brother Ferdinand, and Spain and the Netherlands was given over to Philip, his son, Philip II, I should say. Philip did not have the same affinity for the Netherlands as his father. He made William the Stadthouder, similar to a provincial governor of Holland, Zeeland, and Utrecht. Orange was later named to the same title for Franche-Comté, a mountainous region in France next to Switzerland. In addition, he was made a member of the Raad van Stad, the Council of State, the highest advisory group in all the Netherlands. Philip ruled from Spain. For the first time, we Dutch felt diminished because Spanish troops were garrisoned in our country. Spain had become a leading power in the previous half century because of the resources from the lands that they conquered in the new colonies and elsewhere. One of the things medieval standards still ruled at that time, and it was different from anything any of you might imagine. For centuries, the power in feudal Europe was intertwined between nobles and the Catholic Church. Nobles, especially royalty, believed strongly that their power was derived from God, just as the church leaders did. This divine power was felt to be absolute. If we peasants had a question about something, we would go to the priest. And if he did not know the answer, it was probably not worth knowing. The Netherlands had already evolved a little differently before William arrived. The Guelders, an earlier ruling family, had given the Dutch some freedom, more than most areas. Later, Erasmus, a Dutch philosopher and Catholic theologian, urged people to model their lives after Christ and commune directly with Christ. He argued against routine, empty church practices that had no biblical foundation. His emphasis on learning also resulted in educated people taking local government roles, replacing often inept political appointees of the past. Dutch nobles, especially in the north, were more open to this than nobles elsewhere. Charles had not felt constrained by the advisory role of the Dutch Council of State. Philip felt the council was an affront to his God-given power. He was also jealous of William's growing popularity. William, always trying to appease, named his first son after Philip. It didn't work. Even under Charles, the sting of the Inquisition was felt in the Netherlands. In 1520, when a few influential Protestants were executed, clergy, booksellers, schoolmasters, and officials were targeted. A heretic was burned alive in Friesland in 1530. Hardline Philip II felt the threat even more strongly than his father. Still, he also had his hands full in power struggles with France. The conflicts didn't come cheap. Among his moves was to increase the demand for men, goods, and taxes in the Netherlands. So I know you guys were thinking about this, about the marriages and such. So William's first marriage was to Anna of Egmond, the heir to Maximilian van Egmond, a Dutch noble who had died 3 years earlier. William became the Lord of Egmond. It was a marriage arranged by Charles. Anna told a friend she didn't know him any better than the first days of their life together 9 years later. She died unexpectedly. In an effort to make peace, son Philip was sent to Spain to be educated, and Philip II never allowed William's son to ever return to him. William married a second time to Anna of Saxony. It was a loveless marriage to gain influence in Saxony, the Palatinate, and Hesse, William's birth area. The marriage was also a poke at the Habsburgs because Anna was the niece of a leading Lutheran prince. This Anna was also very immature, self-centered, and demanding. William had always felt he had the ability to convince others to do the right thing. He was learning, dealing with apathetic princes and a hostile wife, that this was not always the case. Anna had an affair and was publicly divorced. In 1575, William was happily remarried to a former nun, Charlotte of Bourbon. William's mother noted he had finally found a wife worthy of him. Charlotte was devoted to William and his existing family. Charlotte, already frail, worn from 6 pregnancies in 7 years, was exhausted by the effort to save her husband's life. After an assassination attempt on him, and she died of double pleurisy. She was perhaps even more loved in the country than William, and her loss was mourned. William married a 4th time to Louise de Coligny, 21 years younger than him. He needed someone to care for his 6 young girls, and she was a practical, organized person. Even though her Huguenot father had been one of William's supporters, her French background was not appreciated by the loud people in Antwerp, William's home. French betrayal of the Dutch had not been forgotten, and then I'll get into that a little bit too in a bit. So back to the political story. Time limits my ability to go into some of the details of all William's successes and failures, but this is kind of a map of the country at the time. Throughout his life, William's main goals were to keep all 17 provinces in what was then the Netherlands together, to honor the royalty, King Philip II, while allowing local people to have some control over their own fate, and to give space to both Catholics and Protestants. When William spoke of individual rights, royalists, especially in the rural South, felt he was undermining the king's authority. As a way to keep William under his thumb, Philip assigned him to look after his sovereign interest in the Netherlands. In 1559, he was sent to France to negotiate a peace settlement with King Henry II. He felt betrayed when the French king confided in him about Philip's secret plan for violent extermination of Protestants in the entire Christian world, including France and the Netherlands. And this is a statement that William made. To exert control over the Netherlands, Philip named his illegitimate sister, Margaret of Parma, as regent of all the Netherlands. She could do nothing without Philip's approval. Philip didn't listen to William or Margaret. She used William to appease the local nobles. Margaret had spies in Orange's home to dishonor him. And these spies, they got a little extra money if they lied. So Philip brought in Cardinal Granvelle, the brother of William's former tutor, to direct a renewed inquisition. Philip asked that Granvelle be made a bishop and gave him control over the Council of State, taking away local authority. Furthermore, Philip called for the Netherlands to provide a 9-year subsidy. William tried to broker a deal that would approve the subsidy in exchange for removing Inquisition enforcing Spanish troops from the Netherlands. Philip wasn't interested in making deals, and he was annoyed that William would try to do that. Most local nobles showed little interest in the deal either. The Council of Trent, which defined heresies, was employed to further oppress the Dutch. In late 1565 and early 1566, troubles were mounting in the Netherlands, and Philip little understood the consequences of his actions. Whole villages moved to England, and other people departed for Germany. Some of the best business people and academics were among those who departed. Protesters were so angry, they freed Inquisition prisoners. To top off the troubled situation, issues with Scandinavian countries cut usual shipping trade. A bad harvest added more problems, and people were starving. William described Philip's response as neither practical or Christian. William still tried to maintain a middle ground and was not swayed by the violent extremism of Calvinists like his brother Louis and Louis's friends. Conspiracy theories and gossip were rampant. William felt powerless. William the Silent, or even better, William the Taciturn, earned his nickname at this time. In 1566, the Confederacy of Noblemen, a group that included William's brother Louis, petitioned Margaret of Parma to end the persecution of Protestants. They denounced the king. The group was scorned as beggars, and in defiance, they adopted that name. While extremist, it was described as the first step to Netherlands maturity. A few months later, from August to October 1566, Protestants rose up with a rebellion called the Beeldenstorm. They took umbrage with the Catholic use of biblical images, citing the Second Commandment, and destroyed statues and pictures in hundreds of churches and monasteries. Catholic worship was suspended in many towns. William kept trying to find a peaceful middle ground, but was pushed by Regent Margaret on one side, at Philip's direction, to crush non-Catholics, and the beggars on the other to join with them. William had some success keeping things calm, but he was not confident in what would happen in the future. When Margaret backed off a bit on persecution, Philip brought in the Duke of Alva, the Iron Duke. In 1567, Margaret resigned 2 weeks after Alva arrived. Alva was known as the cruel fanatic. Philip's further response was to impose a more onerous tax so he could support the Spanish troops who were stationed in the Netherlands. Alva established the Council of Troubles, also known as the Council of Blood. In its first year, it ordered 8,950 people to appear before it. Those who did appear were never seen again. Alva ordered people to attend Mass. There were many unhappy people sitting in the pews. William secretly sold all he could and left what he couldn't sell behind. William went to his family's home in Dillenburg. The property he left behind was confiscated. The money he raised was used to hire and equip German mercenaries and French Huguenots. He signed a document called the Justification, laying out the points justifying a revolution. Patchwork rebels unsuccessfully battled Alva's forces, and as William's money ran out, rebel efforts failed. "We may regard the Prince of Orange as a dead man," Alva said. Even with his fortune gone, William had no plans to give up, though his reputation as a savior was in tatters. Meanwhile, Dutch pirates, who plied the North Sea doing what pirates like to do, were booted from their base in England. They became known as the Sea Beggars, as they found a new objective. They attacked the Dutch port of Brielle. The Spanish garrison troops just happened to be out of the city at the time, and the Dutch welcomed the new invaders. The city was claimed in the name of the Prince of Orange. Other cities welcomed the sea beggars. 3 years after William's total defeat, he planned another offensive with Huguenots to come from the south and Germans from the west. A wedding in Paris would have given the Huguenots power over France and aided the Netherlands. The plan was thwarted when 2 leaders of the Huguenots were assassinated under the orders of Catherine de' Medici. Huguenot forces were no longer available. German princes were reticent to help, and the remaining Dutch troops were scattered by a midnight attack from Alva's forces. Alva set his forces loose in rebel cities, and Alva didn't think much of the natives. "They are a pacific people with no courage," he said. To set an example, he ordered the killing of every man, woman, and child in the town of Naarden. In Zutphen, every man was killed by sword and hung above the smoldering ruins of the town. More attacks. When Alva sent forces under his command under the command of his son to Haarlem, they were held off for 7 months. 8,000 of Alva's soldiers died. Alva responded after the siege by killing 2,000 and fining the city heavily. He said he was being lenient. A siege of Alkmaar failed when farmers sacrificed their land by breaking dikes to flood the land and drive away the Spaniards. Meanwhile, the sea beggars were enjoying success in routing the Spanish Armada. They took the Spanish admiral's flagship and added it to their own fleet of ships. William, who had declared himself a protector of the Netherlands despite being stripped of power by Philip, had continued to publicly maintain his own Catholic faith. In 1573, he made the decision to become a Calvinist. He felt the fervor of the Calvinists would be the best chance for Dutch independence and freedom of religion. William's power and popularity grew to the point where he could have been declared king. He declined and kept a firm belief that the Council of States should have the power. His unselfish stand for democracy is considered one of the most extraordinary achievements in the history of Europe. Philip replaced Alva with a skilled military strategist named Requesne. When 2 of William's brothers took troops to support rebels in Leiden, they were killed in an ambush. Rebels did succeed in blockading the Spanish port city of Middelburg, forcing it to surrender after 18 months. The Spanish blockade of Leiden proved to be a major turning point. The citizen militia had held off strong Spanish forces for months, but ran out of food and supplies by August of 1574. While farmers accepted a plan to break down dikes, it took a miraculous wind to push seawater 27 miles to the outskirts of Leiden. At the time, Leiden's residents were so emaciated they could hardly stand. Spanish troops withdrew in a humiliating defeat. As a reward for their bravery, William made a commitment that would have a more long-lasting impact than statues or medals or ribbons. He established the University of Leiden. By the end of the century, it had become one of Europe's largest and most diverse universities. Philip had also engaged the Ottomans in battle, and bankers in Genoa took note when he couldn't service his debts. Philip stopped paying the Spanish soldiers in the Netherlands, and those soldiers mutinied, sacking the land for food and money. In Antwerp, they took over buildings and killed thousands. You can imagine this did not sit well with the Dutch. So when Requesne died of typhoid fever, he was replaced by Don Juan, the illegitimate son of Charles. Yes, that Don Juan that you're thinking of. This guy was egotistical. After signing an agreement to bring peace, he reneged. His plan was to win, then attack England so he could marry the imprisoned Mary Queen of Scots. Though William had some difficulty controlling radical Calvinists, he was warmly greeted in his travels. Northern provinces and a couple of more urban southern provinces signed the Union of Utrecht. William was offered the role of sovereign, but again deferred to the council. As Don Juan was dying of typhoid, he signed control over to the Duke of Parma. Parma was a diplomat who immediately began working on gaining support for royal loyalists in the southern provinces. Parma's military forces were held off in Antwerp. So when Parma shifted his forces to Maastricht, William told the council it needed to fund its defense. They didn't, and within 10 days, Maastricht fell. William, of course, was blamed. Through this time, Orange traveled throughout the Netherlands, fitting with all classes of working people and nobles, speaking French to the Walloons and natural Dutch to the Flemish. He was open to any person approaching him. His brother John, traveling with him on a 2-month tour of the north, was exhausted. John felt William's efforts to settle so many squabbles was to be pitied. But God is with him. Through William, he is able to endure so much exertion and such continual unrest. John felt his brother was able to squeeze 8 months' worth of work into 8 weeks. Still, there were deep divisions. One count tried to sell Friesland to Spain, and his coup nearly resulted in a civil war. Philip issued a ban on outlaws in 1850, and on March 28, 1581, he offered a reward of 25,000 gold crowns to anyone who assassinated William. Philip felt William had betrayed him, and his advisor Granvelle, now an archbishop, was pushing for revenge. Philip's action against William boosted Orange's popularity among the Dutch again. Meanwhile, the Duke of Parma successfully conquered most of the southern provinces. The Prince of Orange felt he desperately needed outside help to be successful. William's next tact was to get the support of King Henry III of France. He lobbied to have Henry's brother, the Duke of Anjou, named Protector of the Liberty of Netherlands. It was a new title. William saw this as the only way to get French military support against the strength of Spain. The Duke of Anjou came months later. He had delayed his arrival so he could have a torrid affair with England's Queen Elizabeth. William wanted Anjou to feel like he had some semblance of power while he didn't really have any power. Anjou wanted power and was smart, but William also counted on his laziness to not push boundaries. Most important to William was the agreement of the French to bring 2.4 million florins in cash and have the threat of a large French army to give Philip pause. William's response to the ongoing Inquisition was writing a paper called The Apology, justifying the expulsion of Spaniards from the Netherlands. My taking up of arms is because of the security of the rights and privileges of the country and the freedom of conscience. Freedom of faith did not sit well with militant Calvinists, nor the Catholics, of course. The Apology paper makes the innovative case that Philip had failed in his God-ordained duties as sovereign. William wrote, "Whatever things are holy and sacred, these by your aid and God's grace I will maintain," gemeententrouw, a line we associate with William and the Shield of the Netherlands. More than our current English understanding of maintain, the French word calls out mutual obligations. In July of 1581, the Staten General Assembly declared that they no longer supported Philip II through a document officially called the Act of Abjuration, the Plakkaat van Verlatingen. While William was recognized as leader, he again refused the title of sovereign. And as we mentioned, churches were closed. Anjou had proved to be a failure. He had fewer troops at his disposal than anticipated. They weren't efficient, and their commanders were unresponsive. At the same time, Calvinist actions further marginalized Catholics. In addition, Anjou's failure turned many, especially in the south, toward Parma. William's response was to work with a trusted counselor and cut his expenses so he could pay half the monthly costs of the Dutch army. It wasn't easy sailing for Anjou either, the son of the hated Catherine de' Medici. Zeeland and Holland refused to recognize his sovereignty. Anjou was unpopular, and William was criticized for playing French politics. Anjou got tired of not having the power he craved. So he decided to stage a coup, beginning in Antwerp, where William lived. He had no qualms about killing William. His troops, secretly mobilized in January 1583, shot the Antwerp gate sentries and entered the main street of the city. Residents were eating lunch. They left with guns, cobblestones, and slates. A rebel cannon was fired down the main street, striking the invaders. French troops were in a panic and were killing each other, trying to escape. Some drowned in the moat. William had the cannon stop firing as the French retreated. Even with Anjou's actions, the Netherlands needed his troops. They also needed to keep an eye on him. Anjou had thoughts of abandoning his pursuit of Elizabeth and marrying Philip's daughter, an action that would have given her the Netherlands as a dowry, and aligned France and Spain against the Netherlands. Anjou retreated to Dunkirk in shame, with reprimands from other European royals. William's strategic decision to stick with Anjou was the last straw for many, including some of William's best friends. Anjou's departure diminished William's popularity once more because he had supported Anjou. William felt isolated. Anjou's role had shrunk in being in charge of Dunkirk, and he failed even that, giving Parma access to the sea from there with a chance to blockade Antwerp, one of the richest cities in Europe. There were 2 assassination attempts on William. An impressionable young man was convinced to help his debt-ridden Spanish master who had planned to collect the reward for himself. William was always open to anyone approaching from the front. Bodyguards stayed behind. The first attempt came in July 1584. With William's son Maurice and other aides present, the man pulled out a pistol and fired an overcharged shot at point-blank range. The recoil sent the would-be assassin tumbling as the bullet entered William's neck, went through his mouth, and exited through a cheek. Blood was everywhere as it nicked an artery. His assassin didn't know how to use the newly invented handgun, and William was within fractions of an inch of the shot being fatal. "I forgive him my death," William said before he collapsed. The attempt failed, but involved a very long, difficult recovery that killed his beloved wife. She had worked to exhaustion caring for him and the children. Archbishop Granvelle and King Philip had cheered his death when they thought it was imminent. When William didn't die, Granvelle hoped his mind was impaired. When that wasn't true, he figured God had an even more fearful end in store for William. It was time for William to regroup in the north and continue making plans for a united Netherlands. The family moved twice and settled into a quiet life at Prinsenhof in the Delft. It was a simpler life. The house was smaller and drafty. It had formerly been a nunnery. Louise was pregnant in Antwerp and made the difficult moves to Middelburg and then Delft. Baby Frederick Henry was named after the kings of Denmark and Navarre, another political move by William. Shortly after the excitement of the birth, word came that Anjou had died of typhoid fever. Our William began planning for better possibilities without Anjou. Gerard, a rabid Catholic who had expressed extreme hate for William and may have had a connection with Granvelle, presented himself to William as a French nobleman and forged papers and gained access to his home. When William learned that Gerard didn't have money to return home, he gave him 12 crowns for travel. Gerard used the money instead to buy a gun from one of William's bodyguards. One writer said the double charge which entered William's body from the side tore through his lungs and stomach. With great strength, he remained standing. With great strength, he remained standing. With his wife and stepdaughters watching in shock, William's sister tried to help her brother, who had slumped down near the bottom of the staircase. By then, his face was ashen gray. "Do you die reconciled with your Savior, Jesus Christ?" she asked. "Yes," he replied softly. Some sources say William died without saying a word. Others say his final words were French. "My God, have pity on my soul. My God, have pity on this poor people." The nation was stunned by the death, and at a simple funeral, the minister used Revelations 14:13. "And I've heard a voice from heaven saying, 'Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them.'" The Council of Estates paid for a black and white marble tomb as a tribute to his work. The inscription on the tomb reads, "To the glory of God and to the everlasting memory of William of Nassau, father of the fatherland, who valued the fortunes of the Netherlands above his own." William became the first prominent assassination committed with a handgun. His assassin suffered a cruel death in return. William was dead at age 51 on July 10, 1584. He also became a martyr. His views may have had greater sway in death than they would have with him alive, yet his dreams of a united Netherlands died with him. His definitive biographer, C.V. Wedgwood, writes of his greatest attribute. He sought not to impose his own will on the embryo nation, but to let the nation create and form itself. She says he could very easily have slid into a dictatorial role that is almost universal in similar situations. He never did. William respected the right of all men to have an opinion. She found his ideals nearly incomprehensible for its universal significance, saying it renewed faith in humankind itself. And we'll go through other family members real quick. Among his many children, there were only 3 sons. After William's death, his son Maurice, an extremely skilled military strategist, became his successor. There were more battles. Spanish attacks on Antwerp in 1585 drove many community leaders to Amsterdam and led to the Golden Age in the Netherlands, based in Amsterdam. But Dutch forces began winning or holding Spanish forces at bay. After that, what became known as the 12-year truce with Spain was signed in 1609, giving the northern provinces some breathing room, but also allowing Spain to get some internal issues settled. Battles after the truce didn't go quite as well for Maurice. William's youngest son, Frederick Henry, became the leader after Maurice's death. In 1625, he was the successful Dutch commander in 14 major battles against the Spanish. Among those, his wins included defeating the Spaniards' largest, most impenetrable garrison located at Sertogenbos. William Henry died in 1647, fighting until near the end of his life. His victories resulted in the peace agreement, the Treaty of Munster, whose signing was briefly delayed by his death. And then we're going to, let's move ahead 150 years. French Emperor Napoleon's romp through Europe included taking the Netherlands. Dutch forces joined others in fighting back. After Napoleon was defeated in 1815, the Netherlands was reorganized to become a constitutional monarchy. The House of Orange-Nassau was formally installed as the ruling family. And here's kind of what the genealogy looks like. The current, among those people that are in this line included William III, who was Stadthouder of the Netherlands, and also the King of England, Scotland, and Ireland through marriage and political maneuvering. Today's current monarch is King Willem-Alexander, who is right here. One of the things you probably didn't learn in American history is the influence of the Dutch revolt on America's founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson's library had 5 books about the Dutch revolt and its efforts at independence. Spain's heavy hand over the Netherlands had been compared to British control over its North American colonies. Both ruling nations used their power to extract burdensome taxes. And so this is the part of the active. Studies now say that American revolutionaries saw the success of a loose collection of provinces against a global superpower as an example of how a war for independence could be won. History really has no other examples of this being done. The act of abjuration, the Plakkaat van Verlatinghe, is called the model for the American Declaration of Independence. University of Wisconsin-Madison professor who studied both for 15 years, Stephen Lucas was his name, said arguably the most masterful state paper in Western civilization is the Plakkaat. He adds, of all the models available to Jefferson and the Continental Congress, none provided as precise a template for the Declaration as did the Plakkaat. And we'll move back in 1870, Henry Hospers and a caravan of Dutch settlers came to northwest Iowa. I hear Hospers wanted the name Orange City for this new town to honor my friend, a guy who had lived 300 years earlier in a country his group had left behind. But you know what? It undoubtedly is a name the early settlers aspired to live up to. It placed a responsibility on this community that was intended to live into the future. To this day, Orange, in its diversity of meanings, is held in the very highest regard in the Netherlands and elsewhere. Hospers is pictured here with school people. Education was part of the formative Dutch heritage that Erasmus and William helped grow. Around the world, there's orange everywhere. You know, wild carrots were purple, yellow, or red, and those are the colors originally available for cultivation. In the late 1500s or early 1600s, the Dutch were credited by many sources for developing an orange carrot in honor of William. Orange carrot seeds were available everywhere in the Netherlands, and the Puritans brought the seeds to America, where pioneers and Native Americans embraced this new vegetable. Oh, oh that was what the carrots. Sorry, I didn't move along quick enough. Many of you will recognize the crest he used most of his life that carried the motto Gemeententrouw. The Dutch flag is a modification of William's colors. A flag called the Prince's flag was used early before the current style. And that was based on the current style is based on a Dutch naval flag. The Dutch sports logo is an offshoot of William's crest, and this is the sports logo. And it's been stolen by others. Shame on you, Harry Potter. Dutch sports, and as any of you may have seen global sports on television or wherever, know the Dutch commitment to orange. And one final thought. As the esteemed philosopher Frank Sinatra said, all right, thank you very much. Do any of you have any questions? Any questions at all?
I do.
Go ahead.
So I never wanted to be a history major or a teacher like you. So I'm a little confused. This spring I was in the United Kingdom
Uh-huh.
and both Ireland and Scotland, Wales, and continually our guide and places we visited talked about William of Orange there.
Yeah, that would have been.
He did not sound like a good guy at all.
Well, that William of Orange you're referring to was William III, who I'd mentioned very briefly. He married into, he made some political moves, and he married into becoming the king of Ireland, Scotland, and England. So yeah, he was not. You're right. He was not a good guy, and that's why I did not dwell on him. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Any other questions? I hope I didn't bury you with too many facts and such. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said that John was not going to go tonight. What happened to John?
I hope he wasn't assassinated. I don't know.
John, can you go back to the picture of his wives?
Oh, sure.
And you had listed under there how many children he had. How many actually lived?
Oh, I don't know that. I should have counted them, but I don't have that. His family, growing up with 17 kids, I'm sure that, to be honest, I think I had that in my previous presentation that was going to be like 3 hours long.
That's okay. I was just curious. That was kind of.
These are all photographs I took, by the way. Okay, so this is what you wanted to see is.
Yeah, so the first one, she died, right?
Yeah, and he had, so they had 3 daughters. Yeah, I did have that down. Okay,
Yes.
5 children, 1 son and 2 daughters,
That's 6.
6 daughters,
12.
and 1 son.
But of those, the first 3 daughters, died. Oh, just one died.
1 died in infancy. Yeah.
So the Anna of Saxony, when he divorced her, she just disappeared out of his life? Or?
Yeah, as far as I know, it was a messy sort of thing because she was not a nice person.
But Charlotte was well loved.
Charlotte was really well loved by everyone. Yeah, and Mom said she was. Any other questions?
John?
Yeah.
In American elementary education, kids are taught about July 4, Declaration of Independence, War of the Revolution. How are Dutch Dutch kids, what are the equivalent sort of stories that are significant parts of the history of the Netherlands that Dutch kids are taught?
Well, they're taught basically, I believe they're taught basically this history that I mentioned to you. I am not aware of an Independence Day or anything like that in the Netherlands.
Well, you mentioned a number of battles and
Oh, yeah.
which are, are some of them held up in a kind of
The main secular holiday in the Netherlands would be the Queen's birthday. And that's in the spring, and it's, I guess, and I don't know whether it would be a secular holiday or not, but there is, on Christmas, they have Sinterklaas Day, but on Christmas there is a time of silence. Oh, and there is also a time of silence for the end of World War II. Yeah. What's that?
Easter is quite important.
Oh, yeah, Pas is what they call it there, but I was talking about secular holidays. Yeah.
Don't they have an orange festival also, which is kind of equated to?
Well, the festivals they have, there are, there's a time when they celebrate the tulip. There's, and in the south of Holland, it's more the narcissus that they, or not the, yeah, I think it's the narcissus. But yeah, it's, but I don't know of an orange holiday there. Do you know of any?
Just the Queen's birthday is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, that's in early May.
And then armistice, that's huge.
Yeah, that's also huge. That's where they have the moment of silence. Yeah, and traffic actually stops during that time. It's an amazing thing. Television broadcast stop, radio broadcast stop. It's really something. Do you guys have a better sense of why Henry Hospers thought orange was so important? Why orange is still honored today in the Netherlands? Just let me give you one other quote. This is from C.V. Wedgwood again, who's his definitive biographer. He was a man of the world, enough to know that not one man or woman in 100 ever fully understands what he believes or why he believes it. William knew what he believed. If there are no other questions, I'll hang around for a little bit and maybe John will show up.
Well, thank you, John. I want to just make an announcement that our next nights at the museum presentation will be presented by Dr. Richard Rietzma, and will be held on Tuesday, September 20th at 6:30 p.m., and it's titled Orange City's Early Anti-Vaxxers. So find out if this was really a thing. And as always, we want to thank you for your support. We want to thank you for coming out and your donations and just supporting us as an evening out together. So thank you very much. And thank you, John.